All right. Well, oh,
Wait.
give me a point when it's on. All right. Well, welcome to Holly and I's home. My name is Matt. If I don't know you, I serve as pastor of equipping and community development over at Elmwood. And we're so happy that you're able to join us. This is also going to be recorded if you're not able to join us tonight so that you can tune in a little bit later. But to those of you that are observing Passover this year, happy Passover. And for those of you that are using this to kind of guide you through Holy Week, happy Holy Week. I really have a soft spot, I guess you could say, for Passover in some regards, being raised in a Jewish context, coming to Christ a little bit later, more recently in my life, and just having a value for how Jesus is the fulfillment and the fullness of what God's people in the Old Testament had been looking for and coming to. And so I just want to encourage you to just think through the idea that we all come to this table, this Passover Seder, abbreviated at that, but Passover Seder, with different backgrounds and different baggage. But I think if you can just take the time to really invest yourself in the symbolism, in thinking through these concepts, and in the story of what God did among his people, first in the Exodus, but secondly in Jesus, I think that it'll be really, really helpful for you. Right now, I have Facebook pulled up. So if you have questions, I might be able to answer them as we go. If not, then I'd be happy to answer them a little bit later. But you might be asking, why do we do this as Jesus followers? Isn't this a Jewish holiday? Isn't this something that we observe as Jews? And the reality is as Christ followers, we believe that our faith is thoroughly Jewish. Jesus did not come to start a new religion, but to fulfill that which God's people had been looking for years and years. As we look to Matthew's gospel tonight, as we start off here, we see that on the first evening of Passover, Jesus kind of inconspicuously under the cover of night snuck into a place to get just a little bit of time with his disciples before his crucifixion. He had maybe less than 8 hours left before he would die on a cross for his people, and he tries to tell them exactly what his crucifixion would mean. There's very few places where we find Jesus talking about what his crucifixion means. We find a lot of places where we hear him saying that he's going to be crucified. But we only hear one other time earlier in Matthew where he talks about he's going to give his life a ransom for many. And then during the Last Supper, which was in some ways, as we'll get to a little bit later, an abbreviated Seder, we hear him demonstrating what his crucifixion would mean, not through his words or through a theology lesson, but through a meal to his people. So in going through this meal together and the different components of it, like I said, we're not going to sit here and eat in front of you, but we're going to go through the different components and what it would traditionally have within a Seder meal. As we go through this, we remember in a symbolic way how Jesus viewed himself to be the fulfillment of what God's people had been looking for years and years through a meal that was instituted even 1,000 years before Jesus came in the flesh. So let me just start with a little bit of introductory information as we get into this. So as we're going through this, I sent out to some people in an email. It's available on the private Facebook group for Elmwood, what's called a Haggadah. And a Haggadah is a booklet or a guidebook. There's different kinds of them, but generally when you go through a Passover Seder, people follow along with a Haggadah, which has different readings and liturgy and all kinds of different stories to follow along as you're doing that. A Haggadah literally means the telling. So it's how we retell the interactive story about God's people in Egypt and in the Exodus. You might ask what a Seder is. And a Passover Seder, Seder means order. It is a symbolic retelling of the Exodus story, and the order refers to the order with which we go through the different components and symbolic elements of the story. So that's all a Seder means, and we're remembering God freeing his people through his prophet Moses and delivering them from Egyptian bondage. And as we get into this a little bit later, we'll talk about how the Passover points to Christ's sacrifice and is fulfilled in what Christ did for his people. So let's get this going a little bit, and we'll get started here. So traditionally, before the Seder even starts, what generally happens is you light the Passover candles here, and that's usually done by the woman of the house. So I'll light the candles for you if you want to read the prayer. Usually it's going to be, I'll be reading the Hebrew, and Holly will translate it for us, but she's going to read the prayer in Hebrew, and then I'll translate it for us, and I'll light the candles for us. So, honey, if you want to read that, you go ahead.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav vestivenu lihadlik ner shel Yom Tov.
Way to go. That was really good. So that means, blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe or of the world, who sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to kindle the festival lights. So let's light these candles. Try not to light the table up on fire here. There we go. All right. So one of the things that's helpful to know when you're having a Passover Seder is that the whole Seder liturgy is organized essentially around 4 different cups. And those 4 different cups are called, respectively, the cup of sanctification, the cup of plagues, the cup of redemption, and the cup of praise. And the Seder is structured on these 4 cups, but the names of the 4 cups, they're structured around the 4 different promises that God gives his people in Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 through 7. So, Holly, if you're cool with reading that, Exodus 6 through 7.
Exodus 6 through 7. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians.
Perfect. Thank you. So, according to Jewish tradition, we have 4 different promises that God makes to his people, and they're labeled by these different cups, which symbolically represent those. So generally, you would drink the cup and then re-pour it and then have another cup. We're just going to do 4 different drinkings based on when those cups come up. So let's get started. So we have the first cup, the cup of sanctification, also called the cup of blessing. And this cup is meant to sanctify or set apart this Seder as something holy to the Lord, something that we are going to be dedicating to the Lord and remembering what he has done for his people. So we'll drink it together. We'll say the blessing for it. And when we drink it, we lean a little bit to the left, which symbolizes it is a posture of relaxation, the posture of a free people, as God took his people and freed them from bondage. So let me say the blessing. It says, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. And you want to read the translation?
Blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine.
All right. Take a sip. Try not to spill it.
When do we lean to the left?
Oh, we can lean. There we go. Way to go.
Okay.
Good. That's good. So there we go. We've got the first cup. So next thing is the washing of the hands. So we just kind of set apart this observance, this Passover Seder to the Lord. And the next thing we're going to do through some symbolic purification here is we are going to set ourselves apart for the remembering of what God has done for us. So take this, scoop a little bit up. We'll keep it basic. We'll try not to spill it. Take it, we'll put it over here. I'll dry my hands and we can trade. And sometimes you'll have the kids walking around doing this. Sometimes you'll have the woman of the house doing this. So it depends on how it all plays out. So just take it. Perfect. Excellent. Here you go. Thank you. All right. So now we start getting into the first element here, apart from the wine on the Seder plate. This is a Seder plate. Traditionally, it has 5 to 6 elements on it, each of which of those elements kind of helps us to remember one part of what God did for his people. So we'll start with the dipping of the parsley. Instead of parsley, we're going to have lettuce, so we're just going to have a leafy green here. But this is called the karpas, the dipping of the karpas. And what you're going to do is we're going to take one in a minute, and we're going to dip it in the salt water here to the left. and I wonder if it's the left for you guys. It might be your right. But we're going to dip it in front of you guys. And as you do this, the traditional symbolism of this is that the parsley represents hyssop that was wiped over the doorposts of the Israelites, and the salt water represents the Red Sea and the tears of the Israelites as they went through the Red Sea and through everything that they struggled. There's also one other interpretation that I actually recently just learned about, which to my understanding is the oldest interpretation of this element. And it kind of sets us up. We're just entering into the symbolic retelling of the Exodus story. And one of the interpretations of why we do this is when we think back to Joseph. Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob, and his brothers sold him into slavery, and they convinced Jacob that Joseph had died, been killed by an animal. And the way that they do that is they took Joseph's coat, they killed a lamb, and they dipped the coat in blood. And so when we do this and we dip it in here, as we start off the story of the Exodus, why God's people are in Egypt, one of the oldest interpretations is that we dip it in to remember how they got to Egypt, which is through Joseph, and because he was sold into slavery. So we'll grab this. You can grab one too. I'll say the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei peri ha'adamah. And
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the earth.
so take it, mix it up, and take a bite. Oh,
that's really salty. Oh my.
wow.
Okay.
That's a lot of tears. Yeah. All right. That's good. Isn't that? You can take a sip. I'm going to take a sip. Mm-hmm. Oh boy.
Okay.
Oh, don't you love joining us for this? Okay. So the next one is the breaking of the middle matzah. And so generally you have what's called your plate of matzah, or you put it inside something called a matzah tash, which is kind of a bag that you have 3 layers, and you put 3 different sheets of matzah in. The middle piece of matzah is the one that you are going to break. So we'll take this. I'll break the middle piece. Okay. And so what you'll do is you take the middle piece, going to wrap it up. Why don't you put it over there on the fireplace for us? Okay. You wrap it up, and that piece that you broke is generally called the afikomen. And we'll come back to the afikomen a little bit later. Usually you'd wrap it up, and you would hide it for the kids. Generally, this 3-in-1 bag has different symbolism depending on who you ask. It could be representing the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Could be representing the 3 kinds of people in Israel. We have it listed here: the Levites, the priests, and then the rest of the people. So that generally speaking, you have 3 pieces of matzah. The afikomen has been broken off, and now we enter into what we call the reading, the magid, the reading of the story of the Passover. So let's go to this, Exodus 12, 1 to 15. Are you cool to read that for us? All right.
Exodus 12, 1 through 15.
Yep.
The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons. According to what each can eat, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted, its head with its legs and its inner parts. And you shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. In this manner you shall eat it, with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be for you a memorial day. And you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven out of your houses, for if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that is kind of where we find ourselves with the institution of the... Oh, here we go, right here. I'm seeing if there's any questions from you guys on here. Lots of tears. Interesting. I appreciate everybody's comments. So as we do this, that's the institution, right? That is God instituting the Passover meal for his people, this eternal feast. And so as we start getting into like the story of the Passover, this can be a long retelling. We're not going to tell the whole thing. We'll do an abbreviated version. But generally that's kind of initiated by the kids. It's either by the youngest one at the table or by the group of the kids. And they ask this question. They say, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylot, which means, why is this night so different from all other nights? And then they ask 4 other questions that are traditionally asked. And Holly, if you're okay with reading these 4 questions right here.
On all other nights, we eat bread with leaven. On this night, why do we eat only matzah? And question 2, on all other nights, we eat all kinds of vegetables. On this night, why do we eat only bitter herbs? On all other nights, we never think of dipping herbs in water or in anything else. Why on this night do we dip the parsley in salt water? On all other nights, we eat either sitting or reclining. On this night, why do we eat only reclining?
So those are kind of the 4 questions that set up for the leader of the Seder to retell the story. I'm not going to go through the entire story here, but in Deuteronomy chapter 26, what we have is Moses telling the people of Israel kind of an abbreviated retelling. And so for our abbreviated Seder today, I'm going to turn to Deuteronomy 26, and I'm going to read that to you fairly quickly here. So Deuteronomy 26. Here we go. Deuteronomy 26, starting in verse 5, I believe, here. Here we go. And you shall make response before the Lord your God. A wandering Aramean was my father, and he went down into Egypt and sojourned there. Few in number, and there he became a nation great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians treated us harshly and humiliated us and laid on us hard labor. Then we cried out to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great deeds of terror, with signs and wonders. And he brought us into the place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And behold, now I bring the first of the fruit of the ground, which you, O Lord, have given me. So that is going to be our abbreviated retelling of the Exodus story. The next thing that would happen here in a Passover Seder is the second cup. So now we're on to the cup number 2, the cup of plagues. And this is not a happy cup. This is the Jewish people take no pride in the destruction of their enemies. And so generally speaking, if we were going to re-pour the cups, this is the one cup that we wouldn't fill all the way up. This is the cup that we would stop part of the way up. And we're going to symbolically empty it as we go here. So what we're going to do is you're going to take your pinky and you're going to dip it in. And then we're going to say, as we do this, we're going to say each plague here one at a time. Dip it, touch the plate. Dip it, touch the plate.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So we'll do it together. So we'll say blood, frogs, gnats, flies, pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, slaying the firstborn. So as you're doing this, I was going to do the same thing. So as we do this, this is another way of us emptying the cup more. We don't take pride in the destruction of our enemies. We take joy out of what God does in bringing justice on behalf of his people. After this, you might sing traditionally a song called Dayenu, which means it would have been enough, where you talk about God going above and beyond. I don't think everybody wants to hear me sing that song, so we're not going to do that. And so we're going to keep going as we do this, and we're going to drink the second cup now. So I'll say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. Lean to the left.
Oh, lean to the left. We got to remember to do this. All right. That's good. Thank you for the reminder.
Yes.
All right. So let's move on to the next element on the Seder plate. And it's called Zeroa, or the lamb shank bone. I wasn't able to grab one last minute, so we're using a chicken bone today. But it has the same kind of symbolism. We are symbolizing the temple sacrifice, where we're remembering along with that the first Passover, where the lamb was slain and its blood wiped over the doorposts and the lintels, so that death would pass over God's people as he executed justice on behalf of his people against the Egyptians. And this has huge symbolism for us as Christians. And this is one of the reasons why it's really helpful that we understand our Old Testaments when we're reading the New Testament. So I'm going to turn very quickly to John here, and we'll look at John chapter 1, verse 29, where we see this, where John is seeing Jesus come to him. The next day he saw Jesus. John the Baptist saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Now we could read that and we could think he's just referring to some helpless creature or some wimpy creature, but the reality is he is referencing what God had done in the Old Testament and how Jesus is the fulfillment of that. And so we're going to keep moving through here. John, let me ask you, how are we doing on the live stream? We're doing okay? Perfect. All right. So, yes. Oh, I got a question for us, apparently. Let's take a look at the question. I might not know the answer to the question. Let's see. What question do we have? Did you see one on here, John?
When did the Passover festival start?
So we just read about the Passover festival here. So Exodus, Holly just read Exodus chapter 12 is when God initiated it. So that was technically the first time that we have a celebration of it. And the assumption at that point is that the holiday would have been celebrated every single year for the next 3,500 years, essentially. So at the heart of it, I mean, if we're going to historically look into this, the thing is this may be the oldest ritual religious meal that we know of for humanity. So it's kind of a significant thing that we're still doing this today. So it started then. So if we're going to talk it in terms of like timeline wise, this is maybe 1,000 years to 1,500 years before Jesus even. So you can think of it in kind of those terms as well. So John, if you see more questions, feel free to throw them out as we keep going here. I'm going to go back and we're going to keep cruising through this. So the next part here is a second washing of our hands. So let's grab this. So this is reinitiating, reminding us that this is something holy to the Lord. We're going to wash our hands again. There we go. There we go. And as we're doing this, I want to say this. If you look to the Gospels and you see Jesus going through a Passover Seder with his followers here, you'll notice that what he does is a very simplified version. Many of these traditions developed later after Jesus' time, but we do know that Jesus did an abbreviated or a simplified version that many Second Temple Jews would have been doing as well. And as we'll see some of the symbolism come up a little bit later, it's extremely significant, especially for us who take the Lord's Supper together on different Sundays. So we have the second washing of our hands. We reminded us of the holiness of this event and us setting ourselves apart for this event. The next thing is going to be the matzah. So matzah is kind of a big thing in this holiday. When we think about why we have matzah, it's unleavened bread, because as we look to the biblical text, we see that God's people kind of watched what God was doing, had their final meal during the Exodus, if we're going to use an analogy, with their backpacks on. They were ready to go. They were packed up, and God was about to move swiftly on behalf of his people, and they didn't have time to let the bread rise. And so this is why we eat unleavened bread for this. So I'm going to grab the whole thing, and I'm going to say the prayer over the matzah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth.
Perfect, and I'll give this to you. Give that to you. And I'm going to read one more blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us concerning the eating of unleavened bread.
Now, let's take this together. Let's take it together. And as we take this, I don't want to eat with my mouth full, but I want to highlight something here. I think it's worth looking at the blessing we just said. Who sanctifies us with his commandments and commanded us concerning the eating of unleavened bread. I think there's something to be said here for Jewish people and Christians alike, that we both put value on the fact that God has commanded something of us, and we should view those commands, despite the fact of us not being able to live them out perfectly, we should view them as good things. He has sanctified us with his commands. He has made us holy, and it's through obeying him that we become a holy people. Now we're going to move on to one of the most challenging aspects of the whole Passover Seder, and that's what we call the maror, the bitter herbs. So this is probably the least fun part. Traditionally, you would have enough of it that it would make your eyes water, because you want to remember the tears that were shed through this whole scenario. So we're going to take a piece. Just take it. We're going to dip it in. I'm going to say a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us concerning the eating of the bitter herbs.
I feel like I want to cry.
No.
Okay,
No, I've been all right.
All right, you're tougher than me.
I didn't take as much.
All right. So now what you would do is we would eat, so I'll give you a bigger piece. And so what you would do now is you would take what's called haroset. And haroset is kind of this mixture of apples and honey and all that kind of stuff. You take it, and what you're going to do is you're going to put a little bit of haroset on here and a little bit of bitter herbs on here. And the haroset symbolizes the mortar that was used for the bricks for God's people to build. And the bitter herbs, obviously, they represent the tears. And so as we do this, remember that God is able to bring joy out of even bitter situations. And you can just take that right away.
Both pieces?
Mm-hmm. You want to make a sandwich.
Oh, okay.
All right. That was actually better. All right. Now as we do that, we're going to move on to the final elements here. We got an egg. We call that beitza. And the egg represents the daily temple sacrifice that the Jewish people aren't able to make because the temple is destroyed. And I think this is worth noting, that despite the fact that we may seek to atone for our sins, there really isn't a sacrifice available for any of us, because the temple isn't there to make that sacrifice. For us as Christians, we believe that Jesus was that atoning sacrifice, that he was the once and for all sacrifice for our sins. And I think there's symbolism in this, looking forward to Christ in that. As we finish with the egg, this would be the conclusion of the first part of the Seder. We're going to cruise through these last few elements. We would take the meal. You might have a number of different things to eat. Sometimes people eat lamb, obviously a symbolism of killing the lamb and eating that before they left Egypt. And as a historical point, just for something that's fun, you have Rabbi Gamaliel. Some of you might know who that is. If you read Acts, we find out that Paul was a student of Rabbi Gamaliel. And Gamaliel had said there's 3 things you need to do to observe the Passover. First one is eat unleavened bread. Next one is eat the bitter herbs. And the next one is to have lamb. And as we look at Matthew's account and the other Gospels, it's very conspicuous that Jesus doesn't eat lamb with his disciples, that he skips over that for some reason. So keep that in mind, and maybe think about why that is that Jesus doesn't eat the lamb. So as we keep going now, you would send the kids out after the meal to eat what we call the afikomen. Oh, the cat is scratching over here.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
You want to get her, John?
Or here, do you want me to just...
You can do it.
I'll just get her.
Our cat's going to scratch up our house. This is why it's live streaming. And I'll explain the afikomen while we're going. So the afikomen is this middle piece that we folded up and hid away. The kids would go and look for it. It's kind of a fun interactive thing for them to do. And as they do that, thanks, hon. Yeah. As they go to do this, they trade it in, the person who finds it, for money or chocolate or something like that. But there's really a lot of symbolism in this. I think that there's a lot to be said about this idea that you're taking this mediating piece of matzah, you're hiding it away, wrapped up, only to be brought back later. I think it is a huge symbol of Christ, the mediator between God and man, who was hid away in a tomb, wrapped up, only to come later and to come again. So what would happen is the kids would find it. Yep, go ahead and grab it. And they would take it. we'd break it. We would each take a piece. There you go. And as we look at this part in the Seder, it was either here or earlier that people consider that this might be of where Jesus said, he takes it, they say the blessing, so we'll say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth.
So you take it and you eat it. And as we do that, this may have been the point where Jesus dropped the bomb on them and said, this is my body, broken for you. You have this bread that's been beat down, that is the sustenance of God's people in the Exodus, and we look to Jesus, the sustenance of our life as we are freed from sin and death. So there's a lot of symbolism to this. Let's look to the third cup here as we go. So we're now on the third cup, the cup of redemption, based on Exodus 6:6, the third promise. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment. So we're going to take this. We'll make sure we lean to the left this time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, b'rei peri hagafen.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine.
Yes, we got the lean. There we go. Perfect. John, how are we doing on questions? Do we have any more questions here? Are we doing okay? Perfect. All right. Feel free to submit questions if you have any. I appreciate everyone's comments too, that I've seen. So, kind of, according to Jewish tradition, as we look at Malachi 4:5, the text talks about Elijah the prophet coming and heralding the Messiah coming. And so traditionally within a Passover Seder, the kids will go, they'll go and open the door to check if Elijah's here. And there's usually a place setting and a cup of wine for Elijah in case he shows up to herald the Messiah, for especially the Jewish people who don't accept Christ as the Messiah, who are still looking for him to come. And for Christians who are looking for Christ to come back, I still think this has some symbolism as well. But the reality is there's never been a Seder that Elijah has attended. But the question then is that really true that Elijah has not come? Because when we look at Luke 1:17, we see about John the Baptist. It is he who will go as a forerunner before him in the spirit and power of Elijah. When we look to the New Testament, we see that Elijah is a type, and John the Baptist fills the shoes of that type of herald who hearkens the coming of the Messiah, Jesus. As we come to a close here, we come to the fourth cup, the final cup here, the cup of praise. And this is where we rejoice in the future beyond slavery. And as we look at the last cup, the cup of redemption, I want to backtrack for a second and say this may have been the moment where Jesus and his followers took the cup and Jesus said, this is my blood, which is poured out for you for the new covenant. And I won't drink it again until I drink it with you in God's kingdom. And so he talks about that in Luke. He talks about this in Matthew. And as we come to this fourth cup, we have to think about, I think this is worth reflecting on, that this is the cup that we will one day drink again with Christ in the Messianic kingdom, when all of sin has been dealt with, when death is no more, when we are finally free from our bondage, when the creation has been made new and heaven and earth are reunited. So as we drink this, I think we drink this with anticipation of Christ coming back. So let's say the prayer. Make sure we lean left. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, b'rei peri hagafen.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine.
Awesome. And so what you might do at this time as kind of an act of celebration is read what we call the Hallel Psalms. So Psalms 113 to Psalms 118. So we're just going to read one of them just as a reflection. You might sing these. You might do whatever. This is a time of celebration. So would you read Psalm 113 for us, son?
Yes, Psalm 113. Praise the Lord. Praise, O servants of the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. From the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of the Lord is to be praised. The Lord is high above all nations, and his glory above the heavens. Who is like the Lord our God? Who is seated on high? Who looks far down on the heavens and the earth? He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with the princes of his people. He gives the barren woman a home, making her the joyous mother of children. Praise the Lord.
Thank you. So we'll read that. You might read some more for celebration as you come to the close of the Seder. And then traditionally, everybody will exclaim this right here. We can say it together. Next year
in Jerusalem.
So as you say this is, for Jewish people, this is the hope that the Jewish people will be gathered to the city of God, Jerusalem, that the Messiah will come. But I think that there is still significance for those of us who are Christians as we think about the idea that God will come back in Christ, that he will put every enemy under his foot, that justice will be done. And as we talked about, death will be no more, and he will establish his kingdom once and for all. So I think that the heart of this exclamation still holds true for us who are Christ followers. So as we close, I want to read just one or two more passages. One of them is Isaiah 9, 6 and 7. So Holly, would you read that?
For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this.
Awesome. Well, I want to wish you a happy Passover as we come to a close. And I hope this kind of gives you a category for what Jewish people believe and how they go about some of the symbolism when it comes to their Passover Seder. But I also believe that this is important for Christians in the same way that God delivered his people from death through the blood of the Lamb over the doorposts. We believe that Christ is the fulfillment of that, not just delivering people from death in one moment in one freeing event, but he delivered his people from death through his own blood. God came on behalf of his people to shed his blood on behalf of them and to free us from sin and death once and for all. So for Christians out there, as we take communion together, think about the symbolism, the bread and the juice or the wine, whatever you use in your church community. Think about the significance of that symbolism, the reminder of who you are, that you are valuable enough, that Christ shed his blood for you to free you from sin and death. And for those of you that may not be Jesus followers, maybe you're come from a Jewish background, let me encourage you to really dig into the scriptures themselves. And it's my firm belief that Jesus is not coming to bring a new religion, but that he is the fulfillment of what God started in Genesis 1. And I believe he continues it through his people even today, but that he came and fulfilled in Jesus himself. So let me encourage you to think through some of the symbolism. I'm so glad you were able to join us. Happy Passover again, and happy Holy Week. For all those Jesus followers out there, I want to leave you with this benediction. And then I'll let you go about your night. So the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:58, he says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord." So God bless and happy Passover.